I'm not insane, and I find that word to be rather crude and perhaps offensive. It is a word that's only used by those with no imagination. And indeed, I think the line between insanity and genius are rather thin. I feel that for the last few weeks, my life has taken on many unpredictable turns, and I've been walking on this fine line between genius and insanity. I'm not insane. I know that I'm not. But I feel as if I've poked into something that no human should ever interact with. A kind of knowledge and experience that's not meant for our puny, wrinkly brains. The universe is speaking to me, but I cannot decipher its message. And that's why I'm sharing this. I know I'll be judged harshly for my actions and my words, but I'm used to being misunderstood. It's okay if you hate me, understandable even. But I'm still going to share my discoveries because I feel that it could potentially bring some kind of new dawn to the entire human race. I can't explain why though. I feel like an ape staring into the black monolith. I don't understand anything that has happened in my life for the past few months, maybe even years. But I just know, that it's something important. So perhaps a new pair of eyes or two is all I need in order to crack this code. So, let's get back to the beginning, and I'll walk you through all the important bits as they first came to me. And before all of this, I was taking a course to be a nurse. I was studying to be a nurse, basically, and I was enjoying it quite a lot. I feel as if I'd really found myself in this wonderful, angelic job, helping people, saving lives on a day-to-day basis, and never getting as much as a screw you as compensation. I really enjoy the gory pictures, understanding the human body and its many weaknesses, the many ways it can break. It was my favorite. I know that may be alarming, but the truth is that every nurse is like this. Nursing is an extremely tough job, and nobody gets into nursing unless they like playing around in blood. Anyhow, the transition from having no job or education into studying for one of the toughest yet most honorable professions in the world was quite harsh. I went from having an awful lot of free time to almost having none. And this is why I became a bit obsessed with making the absolute most I could possibly do with the little free time that I had. During the weekends, I would stay awake for upwards of 36 hours. I didn't really feel tired in those times. It was much more important to me to be productive instead. Eventually, fatigue would get to me, however, slowly at first, but then it quickly started to overwhelm my senses, and every little blink lasted longer and longer. I had to sleep, but I didn't have to sleep much, and so I started testing, and I quickly discovered that sleeping for a very short period of about 2 hours after every 24 hours was about as much as I could push myself before losing it. This was good. I got a lot of work done using this strategy. Staying awake for so long and sleeping for so little did have its side effects, however, and these side effects are what slowly took over my life. First, I started having much more vivid dreams than I usually have. I normally didn't dream much, unfortunately, but I always enjoyed the dreams that I did have, and when I did dream, they were rather confusing and disjointed, hardly memorable, even if I enjoyed them when they came. However, during these weekends where I would take short naps after long periods of being awake, I would have extremely vivid, extremely interesting dreams. I had some repeating dreams that I could swear I used to have all the time when I was a child. Dreams of an assault and a cat and mouse game inside a sewer system. I have no memory of ever seeing this dream, but it somehow felt familiar, as if I had seen it many times before. I had dreams of old events from my childhood that I could no longer remember, but after dreaming of them, those memories would resurface. I had one particularly interesting, one that felt like it went on for a lifetime, even though it couldn't have gone on for longer than 2 hours. In this dream, I was in a world where people lived in constant fear of nuclear strikes. Somehow, this reality was a heavenly one, supposedly. It was a reality where anyone could have had anything they wanted. However, all of its inhabitants lived in constant fear of nuclear annihilation. I saw this as a paradox. I went out into the streets and protested, and I shouted, "How are these nukes in heaven? What kind of heaven is this? What kind of heaven is filled with nukes?" This drew a lot of attention. The people of that universe were troubled and rejected my message at first, and when the sirens started going off, they all ran for their shelters. I stood in the wide open streets with no worry, because I knew it was a dream, regardless of how real it felt, and I knew that dying here would just bring me back to my other reality. After a while, some other citizens started coming out of their shelters to stand with me in the streets. It was kind of a quiet protest. There were few at first, but eventually there were many. The sirens kept on blaring, but before I could witness the bombs dropping, I woke up. I would like to think that in having this experience, I became the messiah of some kind of micro-reality, and that thought made me happy. The second thing I noticed resulting from my weekend routine was that sometimes I would be in this half-awake state, somewhere between conscious and unconscious. I wasn't tired. I don't really feel fatigue, but it felt as if the line between dream and reality were blurring. One time I woke up right in the middle of one of my short sleeps, and I was in this kind of autopilot mode. I was fully conscious, but I moved on instinct. I reached for my phone, opened a family group chat, and sent them the message. What is the meaning of this? I don't understand. How am I supposed to find meaning? And then I dropped my phone and went right back to sleep. I was sleepwalking. Well, I suppose, but it couldn't be that simple. The lines blurred even further when I started having visual and auditory hallucinations. I would see spiders constantly, very fast spiders that would either jump at me or jump out of sight the moment I saw them. I would see dark figures in the shadows, and they too would lunge at me, and I knew they weren't real, but I would still feel petrified. I saw stickmen dancing above my head in a ritualistic manner. I saw strange fractal patterns moving and warping on my walls. I would see blood. The auditory hallucinations weren't so bad by comparison. At least, until I heard it. One day, I was in that half-awake state again, when I started to hear a voice in my head that was certainly not my voice, but it also wasn't a real voice. It only existed in my head, but it wasn't me. Something was speaking to me. It's quite hard to describe this voice to someone who didn't hear it. It's like trying to describe the color red. You either know what it looks like, or you don't. It's a kind of self-referential knowledge. This voice, this really isn't an accurate description, but it sounded artificial and warm and jovial and full of innocent, pure energy. It was a voice that made me happy just hearing it. It started to tell me things. It said, in its broken and primordial understanding of the English language, "I am Gabriel. I'm coming 0000." I started speaking with this voice, and it would tell me things that I don't think I possibly could have known. I was taking a test for my nursing classes. There were many multiple questions that I could not answer because at this point I was losing focus on my studies. But this Gabriel would pass me the answers. This Gabriel had an unbelievably impressive and frightening knowledge of the human body. It was as if it was there watching as the first human was made. I asked it, "Since you're coming, what do you first do when you're here?" And it said, "I think I will eat a cat." I laughed. Well, I'm sure everybody will love you," I said in response. This day was weird, as I'm sure you've pieced together by now. Even aside from the voice in my head, I was having a lot more visual hallucinations than I had ever had in a single day. And they were frightening too. Bloody red jaws filled with razor-sharp teeth opening wide and lunging at me before disappearing. I would see eyes and smiles in the corners of my vision. I was being watched. I was being hunted. I peeked outside my window, and every person walking on the streets was frozen in place. On my bed was my pet cat, frozen in place too, contorted into this awful, terrible shape that didn't feel natural at first. But then I suppose it was somewhat natural for a cat, since they're a lot more flexible than us. I couldn't sleep, and as the clock ticked closer to midnight, I made a connection in my mind that I hadn't before. 0000. In other words, military time 0. Midnight. I asked Gabriel if something would happen at midnight. "A bloodbath," it answered. And at this point, I downed my meds. I realized that I had stopped taking my meds accidentally, and I couldn't remember when I last took them. You see, I always take my meds before bed because they make me sleepy. But I wasn't really sleeping anymore, so I kept forgetting to take them. But I took them that night. In fact, I took them all. I grabbed the entire bottle of emergency sleep aid the doctor had prescribed me. He never told me what it was. He just told me to take it when I felt I needed it. And I was supposed to dilute it in water, but I didn't have time for that. I broke the top of the glass bottle off, and I downed the whole bottle. And then I went to bed. I went to bed around 11 p.m., 1 hour until midnight. After about 10 minutes, my eyes felt so heavy that I couldn't keep them open. But I didn't sleep. I don't think I slept that night. My eyes opened some time later, and it must have been right as midnight hit, and I saw this gorgeous, otherworldly light in the corner of my cramped room. This is a sight that I once again couldn't possibly describe accurately. I think it must have been something that no other human has experienced, and you need to experience it to understand it. It was white, but only on the surface. It only appeared white because in reality, it was so pure and so unfiltered, so primordial. It had this very slight greenish tint that would slowly transluce into a deep blue. A blue like the night skies, like the cold and uncaring cosmos that had existed for so long before us and will continue to exist for as long as we're gone. That light continued to grow until it enveloped the entire room. It hurt my eyes. In fact, it burnt my eyes, but I couldn't close them. I was surrounded by pure, burning, primordial, abyssal, cosmic white-blue-green. I was in a place where no human had ever ventured before. It burned as hot as the sun, and my eyes never fully adjusted to the burning cosmic white. But eventually I did start to see the things hidden inside that light. They were like simple abstract shapes, rings and circles and triangles and pyramids, and pillars of flesh that stretched into the sky infinitely. And all of it went on forever. Gears and gears and more gears, and it all rotated in a perfect 90 degrees every second with a tick of the clock. It rotated and spun and stretched and skewed with such perfection, such perfect proportions. It was absolute truth. A variable that existed in all things but kept itself hidden, so only those with the most curious eyes could see it. 3.1415, and a number that went on forever. It stretched a hand out towards me. A hand or a finger or an arm or a leg or a foot or a wing. Proboscis, perhaps? I don't know what it was, but it stretched a limb out toward me. And it was in this moment where it finally hit me all at once. It finally struck me that I was in danger. I started screaming, I started clawing, and I started biting, but nothing that I did had an effect. My stupid, useless body would only thrash uselessly in the bedsheets. My guttural screams turned into pathetic whimpers. I knew that this would be the end of me. I don't think that I would have died, but I would have ended. And in me, inside this body, would be this thing, this white light, and it would control me, and I would still be conscious and fully aware. But I would also be powerless, moving purely on instinct. And what was this thing planning on doing with me and my body? I couldn't know. I didn't want to know. I screamed, and I felt as if someone was crushing my lungs, but I kept screaming, and I kept fighting, and eventually that light finally disappeared in an instant, and I jumped out of my bed screaming for my life. I grabbed every knife, every sharp object in the house, and I threw them all away. I put them in hard-to-reach places, threw them out of the windows, flushed them down the toilet. I couldn't make it easy for it. I booted up my computer and felt wide awake, and I knew that I could not sleep. I could not sleep no matter what, because if I did sleep, it would take me. I knew in that moment that I had touched something important, that I had somehow reached past the veil and poked something that existed beyond humanity, and I knew too that this was the scariest night of my life by far. I'm not a coward though, and I'm not insane. I knew that I was straddling the line between genius and insanity. I had to research this further. So in my computer, I started searching for everyone who went through a similar experience to what I had just went through. And it turns out I'd found a decent number of fellow hypnonauts. I invented that term. It takes the word hypnos, originating from the Greek god of sleep, and the suffix naut, meaning explorer. That's what I was. I wasn't insane. I was an explorer of dreams. There were many people searching for counseling, looking for advice to help with managing addiction or other things like that, and they all suffered one or many episodes that were strikingly similar to what I had just gone through. This, to me, was the proof that I wasn't insane. If I was insane, then this would be something that only I experienced. But many people have experienced it, so it must mean that it's real. It's just not me. So I got into contact with someone who was an aspiring therapist or psychologist, an incredibly smart, wonderful person who happened to live close by to where I lived. I don't have their name. I don't even know if they were a man or a woman, but I knew just from our first conversation that this was the most saintly, motherly, and sweetest people I'd ever met in my life, which makes what happens to them all the more tragic. We met in a remote place, surrounded by trees and nature, and all under a beautiful moon. I looked up at the skies, and I couldn't help but notice I saw the abyss staring back at me in a way I'd never seen before. It was that same blue-green-white tint. I sat there, waiting, and eventually they arrived, parking this old, rusted shitbox of a Nissan some distance away from where I was standing, just before the woods got so thick you couldn't drive through them. They sat down in front of me and introduced themselves, but I can't recall their names. They had this sunny smile that warmed my heart, and it felt so good to be speaking with them. I told them everything, much like I'm telling you all now, and they listened and nodded along as I recounted. They never insinuated that I was insane, that I needed pills, that I should be in an asylum, that I should be executed. They did talk a lot about how sleep deprivation could cause cognitive malfunctions in even the healthiest and sanest people, however. I don't think they were malicious in saying this, but I think they didn't fully understand the situation I was in. Yes, sleep deprivation is horrible for you. Yes, it could cause a complete cognitive collapse, but that clearly wasn't what was happening to me. I'd experienced something real. I'd peeked into a world that was not meant for humans. I was not insane. When I stopped talking, they started talking about themselves, and this is when I realized something horrible. They had told me they always wanted to help people, and they wanted to understand those who thought differently, as they put it, and how they wanted to be a listening ear that those people needed but never got. They said they really earnestly believed that they could change the world one patient at a time, and they said they had something of a messiah complex. And that's when it hit me. They wanted to be a messiah. And I was a messiah. I was a messiah ever since I had those dreams about heaven. They wanted to be me. They wanted to take me. I felt my stomach sink and a chill run up and down my spine. This is why they really wanted to talk to me. This is why they were so ready to come meet me in an isolated place where no one would come for my help. This whole thing was a facade. I mean, they really were sweet people, but they were also just pretending so they could get my guard down. They wanted to hurt me. And this is why I had to do what I did. Trying to conceal how startled and afraid I was, I stood up and told them that I had to go. They were confused and a bit worried, but that wonderful smile soon came to their face. It's so sad what happened to them. They offered to give me a hug and then gently, softly did so. I held them close. And then I bit. You see, I have quite a good knowledge of the human body after all those biology classes and my nursing course. I aimed for the side of their neck, where one of the two carotid arteries would be located. It's an artery that connects the heart to the brain, supplying oxygen to it. If your brain is starved of oxygen for even just a few seconds, you will die. Even if you don't die, you will have permanent brain damage. This is why severing the carotid artery would be fatal. I bit down and I felt the blood vessels underneath their skin. Thin, wiry, and taut, like a guitar string. I could go into a lot of detail about what happened next, but I won't, because I'm not some kind of sick psycho. I won't go into detail about how the blood sprayed all over my face. I won't tell you about the sheer fucking ecstasy I felt when that coppery taste hit my tongue. I won't tell you about how much I enjoyed it, because I didn't enjoy it at all. I didn't enjoy the act at all, but I had to do it. The act terrified me, if I'm to be truthful. It was so scary to think that you could die so easily and so meaninglessly. This person, whatever their name was, they were so special. And it's so sad that this happened to them. It was frightening. It was frightening me how much I truly enjoyed it. I'm not insane, by the way. I was laying down next to their bodies, staring into the night sky, covered in blood on my mouth, my jaws, my chest, when I started to feel fatigue, something that I didn't feel often. I laughed. My eyes wanted to close, but I kept them open. I heard trumpets ringing out throughout the sky, seemingly coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. I laughed. I knew they weren't real, just another hallucination. And soon I saw that light, the same light I had seen in the scariest night of my life. Gabriel. It enveloped me again in its agonizing warmth, and this time I could see just a bit more clearly into the abyss. I saw 6 pairs of wings that fluttered so gracefully, completely weightless. I saw the spinning rings of flame. I saw the throne of eyes, and each one of those eyes stared into me, past the skin, deep into my soul. And that judgmental stare made me feel like I was this worthless, tiny, weak, insignificant, horrible piece of shit, the sad excuse for a human being. It burned. And then Gabriel spoke to me one last time, in that sweet, warm, and melodic voice it had. God is coming in 368,172 days.